In this project, we're going to calculate the payroll for a company. I hope you know how to calculate payroll because when you have a job, you'll want to make sure that your paycheck is correct. But in this case, and this is unique to this company, an employee working 40 or fewer hours has payroll calculated by multiplying the pay rate, how much they get paid per hour, times the hours worked. An employee working more than 40 hours has the typical overtime payroll calculated. Overtime, you might have heard, is calculated at time and a half. So any hours greater than 40 are calculated by the normal pay rate times 1.5. So if you made $10 an hour, for the overtime hours you worked, you would instead make $15 an hour. That is then added to the normal pay rate times 40 because those first 40 hours you get paid at your normal pay rate. It's just any additional hours past 40 you get paid at time and a half. So here's an example equation for overtime. Now at this company, if an employee works more than 40 hours, but they also make more than $20 per hour, they have their pay calculated at the normal rate, just like an employee working 40 or fewer hours. All right, just to break this down a little further, let's look at some examples that actually have the math completed with them. So let's take, for an example, an employee that they get paid $10 per hour and they worked 40 hours a week. So in this case, we would just multiply the 10 times 40, so their pay would be $400 for that pay period. Let's look at an example of an employee that works more than 40 hours in a pay period. So a sample employee makes $10 an hour and they worked 50 hours. The amount that they worked over 40 hours, so we can say 50 minus 40, those hours are calculated at a rate of time and a half. So we do their pay rate at 10 times 1.5 and multiply that times 10. So that gives you 150. And then we add that to their regular rate of pay, which is $10 times the 40 hours they worked. So the $400. So for this pay period, this employee earned $550. 150 of that was solely on overtime hours. Now let's take a look at the third example where an employee works more than 40 hours, but they are earning more than $20 per hour. So in this instance, the employee is making $30 per hour. They worked 50 hours, so we just calculate that as normal. 30 times 50 gives them $1,500, okay? So how can we create this in code? We know we need some kind of selection statement. Look at our possible outcomes here. We have a possible outcome of using this equation, a possible outcome of using this equation, and a possible outcome of using this equation. So what type of selection statement do you think we would need? Well, there are 3 outcomes here, but 2 of them are the same outcome. So really, we only have 2 potential outcomes, and in that case, just an if-else statement will work best. So if something is true, we'll execute one block of code, else we'll execute a different block of code. Okay? So if an employee works more than 40 hours and they earn less than $20 an hour, we use this equation. Otherwise, we're going to use this equation. Okay? So this is what that flow chart looks like. As hours greater than 40 and, see our logical operator, rate less than 20. If so, we use this calculation or this formula to calculate pay. If it's not, we use this formula to calculate pay. All right, let's try that in code. Okay, create a new file in code saved as payroll.html. Use your exclamation point tab shortcut to get your basic content. I added a title of Calculate Payroll, and this content was added into the body. An H1, Calculate Employee's Paycheck, a button with the value Calculate Pay, and then a script section. Just as a note here, button is actually not a good ID name, but our purposes here is to focus more on if statements than every little nitpicking thing. So for right now, we'll just leave it as is. Pause the video if you need to copy your code over. And then in our script section, we're going to create a new function called paycheck. We need to ask the user of our website to enter the employee's pay rate and how many hours the employee worked. And the best way that we know how to do that right now is with a prompt box. So let's create a variable for the rate of pay. Let's just call it rate. And we know that we create a prompt box. We've done that over and over again. But for this input, we will be doing math with it. So if we need to use a value in a calculation from a prompt box, we have to do something. Do you remember what that something is? Parse. Okay, so we either parse int or parse float. An int would make it a whole number, a float would make it a decimal number. And since a pay rate could have a decimal, let's do a parse float. It is a function, so we have to include parentheses. Inside of those parentheses, we'll add our prompt, which is also a function, so it has to have parentheses as well. Let's say enter employee's pay rate. All right, we're going to basically repeat that process for the hours worked. So we'll parse, and we could parse float for that as well. Prompt the user. Enter employees' hours worked. Now, normally there is a section where you declare all your variables at the same time, and we'll need a variable to store the employee's pay. So I'm going to create the variable but not initialize it. So I'm just creating the variable, but I'm not giving it a value yet. Okay, so we know from our flowchart that we need to have some sort of if statement, and we took a look at that and saw that it was hours greater than 40 and rate less than 20. So if hours greater than 40 and rate is less than 20, then we'll calculate the pay using the overtime formula right here. Okay, so here's our equation. We are calculating the hours, the overtime hours, so how many hours over 40 the employee worked, and multiplying that times time and a half. And then on this side of our plus sign, we are multiplying at the regular rate of pay times 40 hours worked, and then adding those two sides together, which will give the final pay. Now, there's only two options in this case. Remember, we said you can either, yes, you have met this criteria and you're calculated this way, or no, you haven't met this criteria and you're calculated this way. So we only need an else statement, no else if. So our else statement will look something like that. We'll just calculate the pay at the normal rate. Okay, this is going to calculate and store in pay, but unless we give some output to the screen, the user has no way of knowing what the paycheck will be. So let's write something to the screen using document.write. Let's just say your paycheck this week will be $, and I'm not going to add a space there because I want my $, right by the amount, and I'll concatenate that with the value of pay. Nothing's going to happen until this function is called, so let's add an event listener to call that function when the button is clicked. Document.getElementById, and my ID's name is button. Add event listener. On click, I want to run the function paycheck, and I included my false. Okay, let's test it and see if it works. Refresh here, calculate pay. I'm going to use the inputs that I used in the example that we walked through earlier in this tutorial. So I'll say 10 and 40, and we should get 400. Okay. Now let's try 10 and 50 hours worked, and we should get 550. And now let's say 30 and 50 hours worked, and we should get 1,500, and we did. So our program works correctly. Now for you to try. I want you to create a project that tells the user after they enter their age whether or not they are a teenager. You will need an if-else statement that contains a compound condition. If I enter age and I say I am 13, it should say you are a teenager between the ages of 13 and 19. If I say I'm 15, it says the same thing. But if I say I'm 20, you are not a teenager. If I say I'm 12, you are not a teenager. If I say I'm 40, because I'm 40, you are not a teenager. I know. I definitely know I'm not a teenager. Okay, so try this on your own. You may want to refer to the vote project because it was very similar. You were entering an age. So if you want to start with that file and then just save it as teen.html and change your functions. But if you do use that as a starting point, make sure your variables and functions are named appropriately. Just don't name them gibberish or don't name them something that doesn't make sense for the particular project that you're working on. Okay, happy coding!